informed journalist, and that's the achievement of my visit here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sajid. And the last speaker is John.
Thank you very much, Shabir, and thank you to the East-West Center for really a wonderful, enlightening experience. But as I sit here today and look around this room, I realize that I have to begin with a confession, and that's that I was spreading a little misinformation when I was in Pakistan. I was asked time and again, what do Americans think not only about U.S. policy in Pakistan generally, but on a lot of particular points, what do Americans think? And the word that I kept trying to convey is that most Americans know very little about Pakistan, would have a hard time finding it on a map, and frankly don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. So here I am in Honolulu, Hawaii, paradise on earth on a beautiful day, and here's a room full of Americans who want to learn about Pakistan. So I think the East-West Center is going to have to send me back there next year so I can set the record straight. Let me tell you a couple of my impressions of the country generally and of the effects of U.S. policy. I think more than anything else, the thing that struck me in Pakistan is the extent to which everyday life in that country is being affected by not only the war on terrorism, the war in Afghanistan, but in the geopolitical situation in ways that we in this country cannot really imagine. I think when Americans think of Pakistan, we think of it through the prism of, is this country a friend or a foe of the United States? As George W. Bush famously put it right after 9/11, and it seemed like he was talking right at Pakistan, you're either with us or you're against us. And while no one in Pakistan quite put it to me this way, I think a lot of Pakistanis are asking that question about the United States when they see not just the general thrust of U.S. policy, which I think there may be an element of support, but some of the specific ways in which we are really working against our own interest. Let me tell you about some of the things that struck me in terms of everyday life. You know, we went through, spent some time in the capital city of Islamabad and the largest city in the country of Karachi. And the thing that really strikes you as an American is the high-profile presence of security in ways that we could not imagine. We stayed at a Marriott in Islamabad that had been bombed by a suicide bomber in 2008. And getting into that Marriott, which was rebuilt 4 months later, was almost like going into the White House. You had like the barriers, you had guards who would come out with bomb-sniffing dogs, and they'd have the mayor under the car. This is just to get into a hotel. And as you go up and down the streets, it's not uncommon that you would see a private residence that would have an armed guard 24/7. You would see razor wire, and you could sort of measure the level of threat of a particular place by how thick the razor wire was. I mean, this is something that obviously people in Pakistan are living with every day. And I was reminded time and again, as we look at the United States often as Pakistan, what are they doing to prevent the war on terror? I think the thing that we oftentimes are not cognizant of in this country is that Pakistan is as much a victim of terror as it is anything else, because we're talking in Pakistan of 30,000 people having given their lives since 9/11. The other thing that you're very much aware of is when you go to Pakistan is you think of, okay, there's the good guys and there's the terrorists, if you look at the George W. Bush view of the world. But if you look at the landscape in Pakistan, you realize that some terrorists are with the government, some are against the government, many of them are against each other. It is not a simple equation by any means. I thought one of the more profound meetings that we had in dealing with the issue of drone attacks and how effective that has been in Afghanistan is we were at the Institute of Business Administration in Karachi talking with a group of students. And one of the students got up, and we asked them questions, and they asked us questions. And he talked in very plain terms about the friends and relatives that he had lost to drone attacks who were innocent civilians. And you really felt that throughout the country, that the collateral damage that we have from these drone attacks is having a really corrosive effect on Pakistani support for U.S. policy. And certainly the drone attacks started under George W. Bush, but in a much more collaborative way with the Pakistani military, where they were going after higher value targets. In the Obama administration, the drone attacks have been escalated considerably, and the sort of severity of targets has been widened a great deal, and at great cost to the United States. You know, one person I thought put it best of the many people that I talked to about drone attacks when he said, look at it this way. Imagine if in the United States there was a portion of New England where people were plotting to do harm to Pakistan, and Pakistan sent drones in to kill those who were plotting against their country, and oh gee, just as a matter of the cost of doing business, that a few Americans died. Imagine what the outrage would be in this country. You can't even imagine what it would be. And that was what he was talking about in terms of the cost of drone attacks. Two other quick observations about sort of the day-to-day impact of the geopolitical situation on Pakistan. Even in the capital of Islamabad, in the major city of Karachi, power outages are such a regular occurrences that when we had meetings, sometimes the lights would go out, and it would take a minute for the generator to kick back in, and the speaker would not miss a beat. You know, imagine if the lights went out here. I mean, suddenly there'd be a big gasp, and we'd not know what to do, and I would, lose my train of thought. There is just part of daily life, and these are in the major countries, and we were in areas that had generators. One can only imagine for the families in the many parts of the country where power outages extend 16, 18 hours a day. And how is U.S. policy affected with this? Well, there's a couple things that Pakistan would really like to do to improve its energy situation. And one of them would be to run a natural gas line from Iran, which obviously this country is not going to let it do, or to develop civilian nuclear power, which this country is also very much, the United States, the Obama administration is very much opposed to. So it's very common. One of the things that you'll hear when you're over there is that the United States gets blamed for almost everything that goes wrong, but certainly there are U.S. policies that are counterproductive. I'll give you one more example that I found fairly telling. Tara mentioned the bin Laden raid, which I probably disagree with my Pakistani colleagues on that. I think if bin Laden is hiding in any place in the world, as one person put it, if he were in Canada, we would send our Navy SEALs into Canada to get him. But what did we do that was insensitive in that raid is that we had this Pakistani doctor who had a fake vaccine program to try and get the DNA of bin Laden's relatives. On the surface, always sounded reasonable to me, but we went and talked to some of these relief workers and people who were working at NGOs, and they were talking about particularly their efforts to combat polio and other preventable diseases in Pakistan. And one of the real difficulties that these American relief organizations have is getting the confidence and trust of local people. So one can only imagine how that job is complicated when the CIA has run a fake vaccination program, that they then go out to these tribal areas, these relief workers, and try and persuade people, no, this time it's not this, we're not the CIA. So it really shows how even when we're doing what I think most Americans would agree is the right thing overall, that we make these little cultural mistakes that are so costly. And one final observation that Tara alluded to, and I would absolutely agree with, is small as the percentage of support for Americans may be, for American policy may be in Pakistan, I have never visited a place in the world that was so hospitable and the people were so friendly when you get to a person-to-person level.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, John. That was, I mean, you listen to the panelists, and then you will really realize why East-West Center, and this is not my boss, Charles Morrison speaking, it's myself speaking, why we think that investment in these kind of exchanges is the best investment you can make. If you look at their impression, each of them was trying to look at the situation from the other country's perspective. Because if John had gone to Pakistan to repeat the American narrative, he would have been a tourist. But he went with all of them went with a open mind to assess the situation. The floor is now open for comments, suggestions. Yes, sir.
I want to say, I think that one of the truisms that came out from all of you today was, all of you mentioned pretty much, that Americans really know very little about Pakistan. And quite frankly, we spend very little time thinking about it. We do care more about our local city council election or the dog immigration program or whatever. But my question to you panelists is that a fault somewhat of journalists, I think to the two American representatives, because most of what I read in the paper only reflects government's thoughts, which is Pakistan is being non-cooperative on many levels, Pakistan is closed off our supply lines, Pakistan refuses to get along with India. So we don't hear much of another point of view, the Pakistan point of view.
So, you know, to make sure that this is a even playing field, I'll add a question to the Pakistani journalists, the same question. Do you think that the sacrifices that the American government and the people are making in terms of financial support and other commitment to Pakistan, even though there is a extraordinary difficult economic times in the United States, are those things reflected in among the presentations and reporting that the Pakistani journalists made, so that each of you have that question? We start first with the American journalist. John.
Well, I think there's a couple things at work here is why you don't see more coverage of foreign affairs generally, and Pakistan specifically in the American press. One is I think it is a reflection of, you know, newspapers, especially in the difficult position that we're in right now financially, do a lot of surveys, and one of the things that we see is that people want us to write about what affects them in ways that they can tell tangibly at the dinner table, or specifically right now at the gas pump, as opposed to what's going on overseas. But I don't think you can entirely blame, you know, the media, because especially in this, you know, blame news organizations for their emphasis. I mean, part of it's financial, part of it's, you know, trying to figure out what people are interested in. But I suspect, especially in this day and age, when you can really do a la carte journalism yourself as a consumer, you know, I wonder how many people, when they put their favorite links on their web browsers, have Pakistan. You know, I doubt if there's very many. So I think there's a couple things going on, and I think it's a paradox that we struggle with right now, in which the United States is connected to the world in ways not just militarily, but in terms of business, and I'm sure you're well aware of that, you know, here in Hawaii. But even as we become more connected and interdependent with the world, Americans tend to be becoming more and more isolationist, and certainly, you know, the Tea Party and others have really played on that.